All right, that was quick. That was about 2 seconds just to make sure I had a split video here. Dry on the vine raisin production. You can do dry on the vine where you have the drying racks set up within your field and you literally dry it right on the vine. Another way to do it. And so here's a dry on the vine trellis system so you can see the catch wires. And at some point you will separate the canes from the vine, so they're no longer attached to the ground, but for a large portion of the drying process, they're dehydrating while they're still attached to the plant, to the cordon and trunk. And I'm not familiar with at what point of drying do they finally make the separation. But here you can see the dry on the vine. Machine harvesting, I'm sure that's what we do here in the United States, especially California Central Valley. I've heard talk about the machine harvesting operations that are done. Again, you're not after table grapes, you're after raisins, and so machine harvesting is something that you can get away with a lot easier because the finished product is dried down and doesn't look like a fresh table grape at all. Inspection and storage. Field-dried raisins are transported to processing plants where they are placed on wire screen and shaken to remove the dirt and other unwanted debris. They are also inspected to ensure the quality standards. And they'll also have blowers to take the light stuff off. So screens allow the small stuff, the dirt, sand kinds of things to fall through the screens, and fans take off the light pieces. Some of the raisins are stored for later processing. For storing, they are stacked in enclosures which are constructed with polyethylene sheeting fastened to wooden frames. So you can kind of picture this. The stored raisins are emptied onto the conveyor belt where the residual sand and debris are removed. Immature fruits are removed by suction, and raisins are separated from the bunch stem by shaking, and the cap stems on each raisin are removed by being passed through two rotating conical surfaces. And that's an important concept here. You'll see the cap stem in a picture in a moment, and there's a lot of mechanical steps, engineering steps to get the raisins separated from everything you don't want. And they can be sized, they can be graded, you know, lots of very simple technology that has gotten to be quite advanced and refined to make these processes happen. The graded raisins, graded by size and density, are packed for individual consumption or industrial use, like making bulk cookies or cakes, pies, whatever. They're always run through a metal detector for unwanted metal particles. Very important. Quality control is an important step to ensure that the product standards are met to achieve high market value. The degree Brix is measured to ensure optimum sweetness, acidity measured to determine pH and sugar acid ratio, just like in table grapes, just like in wine grapes. The numbers are just different. The final numbers are different. Weight per volume is measured, which is an indicator of fruit quality. During picking, care must be taken not to place bunches with insects or mold onto the trays, so that you need trained people to be watching, paying attention. Damaged berries should be sorted and discarded, as the oozed liquid will attract insects. So one bad bunch can do damage to a lot of other bunches and cause an insect infestation to spread through your production area, drying area. At the factory, the raisins are thoroughly inspected. They are also subject to a variety of laboratory analyses to ensure the production of a consistent, high-quality product. So here's some terminology. The stem part is the part which connects the main stem of the bunch of grapes and sub branches of the main stem to the grape stem, what we would call the rachis. The grape stem or cap stem is a small wooden stem which is longer than 3 millimeters and binds the grapes to the grape twig sub bunches. In other words, a little mini stemlet, tiny stem piece that joins the grape to the rachis in our terminology that we've used in class. The grape stems, which are shorter than 3 millimeters, are not taken into a consideration in the tolerance calculation. So it's like, well, what is this longer than 3 millimeters? What about the shorter ones? The shorter ones are just considered irrelevant. If you're eating a box of raisins and you have these tiny cap stems every once in a while, you eat them. People might spit them out, pick them out, but they're, at least in their plant, that's the number, that's the cutoff. Less than 3 millimeters, they ignore them. More than 3 millimeters, they consider them a quality defect. So here's some of the stem part, the pieces of rachis. And here's the cap stems. You can just barely see it here. And they've picked off a few of them, these cap stems. I'm trying to think, is it a pedicel or a peduncle in grapes? I think it's a pedicel in grapes. If you learn the biological term of the cluster, I think this is called the pedicel, but it doesn't matter. I'm not going to ask you that on a test. But the pedicel is the kind of the equivalent, in a way, of a petiole to a leaf. A petiole is part of the leaf, and the cap stem is that supporting structure for the flower. And so it separates, and you don't want too many of these in your raisins. So a quality control person is going to go through and count the cap stems and ignore the ones, at least in their quality assurance, ignore the ones that are too small and count the ones that are 3 millimeters or over. So here's some other terms in the quality control. You've got cap stems that are greater than the 3 millimeters. The loose stem, which is a piece of the rachis that got caught in there. An embedded stem got squished into one of the berries or more than one of the berries. Grapes of immature or undersized seedless raisins. These are the grapes which are light, whose saturated tissue is destroyed, which indicates the ripening maturation is not completed. So you have an undermature grape, which are totally wrinkled and hard and have hardly fleshy parts that have a caliber under 5 millimeters. So these need to be removed. And the beauty of it, with screens and blowers and shakers and separation based on weight and size and density, you can combine all of these things to end up with just what you want. The bad grapes are gone, the dirt and the stems are mostly gone, and you're left with quality grapes. Now you do get some that go through the process. We just saw things like a stem part that can go through in the last picture, moldy grapes, so you know what the heck that is. Damaged grapes of seedless raisins, which have important deficiencies in their outlook, consumption, quality, whatever. There's some sort of damage that reduces the quality. There's something called sugared grapes. And it's the grape of seedless raisins, which have sugar crystals both inside and outside that affects its outlook negatively. And this can happen with time as well. I've had some raisins that were past their expiration date, and the texture's different, and they feel almost kind of crunchier. And it's because the sugars have crystallized over time in storage. Instead of being nice and chewy and somewhat soft and smooth, with the texture of a good quality fresh raisin. They just are a little drier, a little crunchier, a little different feel in the mouth. And they don't have to be old to get that way, but old raisins do get that way. So you have this excess crystallization of sugar. Not good for raisin production. And one of the reasons why some grapes just don't make good raisins. You have some grapes that just have a high propensity to produce a large percentage of these sugared grapes. Not good for making raisins. Bleached seedless raisins. It is the raisin bleached chemically before or after the drying process. Unbleached or natural seedless raisins, the seedless raisin which is exposed to no chemical process or is sun-dried after dipping into a dip solution to save its natural color or structure. A round. Now, I'm not sure if that's the same terminology we use here in the US. I'm not really familiar with the terminology of all of the raisin production, but I think we use this terminology, but I'm not sure. The other terms I've heard before talking to people, but a round is when you get the grapes sticking together into this clump or lump. Different things can contribute to this. Moisture getting in there, improperly dried, too much pressure by stacking the grapes, mold or mildew that causes things to kind of mush together as they're drying, etc. Substandard development, well, fleshy part is not ripened properly or mixed with twigs. Foreign substance, well, that's pretty obvious. External herbal substances, so you're getting things that shouldn't be there, leaf material, etc. Not going to even bother with that. So different types of raisins, don't worry about the numbers here, but there's different rankings, certainly in their terminology based on types, based on color, which goes into different markets. So if you're creating a product, maybe you're making a particular dessert and you want type 10s or you want type 11s or you want type 8s for that cake or carrot cake with the raisins, you need to know which type based on its color characteristic. And there are other quality factors you can specify, size, things like that. Bleached, natural undipped, and natural dipped. So you can see the natural dipped does have less browning, but it's certainly it's dipped in a process that is going to alter the finished product, but it's not bleached. Bleached is using the sulfur dioxide treatment in order to stop oxidation. Sizes, standard jumbo or medium, whatever. Again, you don't have to memorize these things, but it's pretty obvious. If you are ordering things for making your product, you need to order what color, what type, what size. Codex Alimentarius. You should know this. This is a Latin term meaning food code, and it is the international code or collection of international recognized standards for all sorts of things. Codes of practice, guidelines, and other recommendations related to food. And Google thinks I'm talking to her. Go away, Google. I don't know what thing she's heard me say over the last weeks. There's a new phone. The last one finally died after years. Anyway, Codex Alimentarius. This is something, if you're in the food world, if you're in processing, you should know about it. It is the International Food Code for all things for food production on an international level. And there are more things that feed into it. Global Gap, for example, is part of food safety, but Codex Alimentarius includes tons of information. It's going to let me go there. There it is. Codex Alimentarius, the international food standards, and tons of information. I would advise anybody to be familiar with this. If you're not, you should be. And there's a bunch of different things, Codex standards for raisins. And take a peek at this. I'm not going to go through this. It's too small. But you can certainly look at what the international standards are for raisins and read this pretty quickly. And several slides, defects, seedless types, seed-bearing types, you know, the kinds of things that you would want to know if you are one of the people who's working in a raisin production environment. You need to know this stuff. Basic hygiene issues to meet international hygiene standards. And that's it. That is raisins. Go buy yourself a box of sun-made raisins and enjoy.